Guy Powell is a marketer. He's a historian. He's a Christian. He is the author of The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. His historical fiction explores the journey of the Shroud from Jerusalem to Turin, Italy. He was inspired by Wilson's The Blood in the Shroud. He's also a podcast host. He has a podcast titled The Backstory of the Shroud of Turin, and he delves into a great variety of subjects regarding the Shroud, talking with experts through their interesting backstory of his guests and what brought them to the Shroud. So welcome, Guy.
Yeah,
Hello to
hi.
you. And I'm going to switch the table on you. I'm going to do a backstory, but you're going to be the guest.
Yeah, thank you.
So what is
It's
so
funny.
interesting, and we all have a backstory of the Shroud. We all have that story that brought us to why we are interested in the Shroud, why we want to promote it. And I hope through Guy's talk that you're all encouraged to write down your story so that you can share it with others. So welcome, Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It is funny. I ask everybody in my podcast, what's your backstory on the Shroud of Turin? And then, and now you're asking me, so I had
Yes.
to kind of go back and figure out what it was.
Yeah. So what was it?
Yeah, thank you. So it's and I don't know, this will kind of show my age, but I do kind of remember 1978 and then 1988, 78 the STIRP, and I remember it having some articles in various magazines, and I go, wow, that's really interesting. And so I read a little bit about it, but I kind of said, wow, it's very interesting, kind of, and I read up, a little bit more about it, but I didn't really do very much with it. And then, of course, in 1988, the disaster of the carbon 14 dating, and then I, basically forgot about it because it's been disproven. I'm not gonna go there. And I hate to say it, for all of us that are that old, I think that really stymied the research and knowledge and desire to learn more about the Shroud, and in a pretty big way. And so, in 1988, 1989, not very much happened. And then my brother, I don't know, we were just talking, maybe about 10 years later, and I don't remember exactly when it was. So it might have been around 2000. It might have been actually earlier. He sent me Ian Wilson's book, The Blood in the Shroud. And I remember it sitting there on my shelf, and I said, "Oh, let me read that and see what it's all about." And as I read it, I was fascinated. He did two things. He wrote the history, which was really interesting, but it was a historical book. And then he wrote a kind of like a timeline, in 1356, this happened, in 1357, this happened, in 1358, that happened. And as I was reading that, and I read each and every one of those, and I guess I'm weird that way. I liked I just liked that. I was just kind of fascinating to see how he was so detailed and, all of these different facts that he had. And I remember as I was reading it, I said, somebody should write this as a historical fiction. And so I wrote the first chapter more or less of my book. And this, like I said, it goes back 20, it might even be longer than that. I wrote the first chapter of my book, and then I kind of put it aside. Life got in the way. My kids were, getting older, and so I spent more time with them. And to write a book, it takes a lot of effort. It took me about 2 years to write my the book, The Only Witness. And unfortunately, so I kind of, I like to say God gave me a nudge at that point, and I ignored it and I didn't listen to it. But every weekend or every month, I said, I really need to get back to that. I really need to get back to that. And then, I would read up on the Shroud and learn a little bit here and there, as as different things became available. And then in the when COVID hit, I said, I am now going to dedicate some time to it. And I like to say, God finally nudged me, and I finally fell off the cliff, and I started working on the book. And it was just a lot of fun. I researched a ton of history at the time, and then reread Ian Wilson's book and kind of got his history, and and so then I wrote this historical fiction. It was really my first fiction book. I'd written a handful of other books, but that was my first fiction book, and it took me about 18 months to get done, and then another year roughly to actually get it published.
And
And
where can people get the book?
and of course, you can get this online on Amazon, primarily Amazon. You know, any of the online stores, it's available. You can download it on Kindle and stuff like that. And but one of the things as I was writing, and I says, what is the purpose of my book? And as I was writing it, I kind of said, you know, what I want to do is I want to convert one person to Christianity. And I just said only one. Now, obviously, I'd like to get a lot more than that, but only one is my primary goal. And you know, if I can get one, then you know that'd be fantastic. And I think I've beaten that. I've
Good.
certainly presented on the Shroud quite a bit. I did a presentation on the Shroud to India where there were 70 other pastors. And so they were then going to use the Shroud in my presentation, then to go out and evangelize to India, you know, to be able to bring you know well, non-Christians over to Christianity. So I think if I take kind of an indirect approach, I've probably got then, you know, maybe 50, 100, maybe even 1,000 people that I've been able to evangelize
Yeah,
over to
I'm sure it's
Christ.
more than that. And that's interesting what you say about COVID, because that's also where the ministry where I work at Pilgrim Center of Hope, it was because of COVID, we started turning our focus to the Shroud as well. So then how did the podcast come about?
Yeah, well, you know, so I'm a marketer, and you know, and as I was writing the book, you know, everything you read about how to write a book, you know, is only half the story. You know, build it and they will come doesn't really get you very far. So you have to build it and then also make them come. So it's kind of a half and half. You know, you have to write the book and then you have to promote it. So I started promoting the book through my podcast primarily. And it's on Apple and Spotify, and then the video ones I do just like this with Zoom, and they're on YouTube. And please sign up for it. Would love to you know, continue my you know, my followership there, and so that happened. I've done a handful of talks on it. I've actually got one this afternoon that I'm doing at my church, and I was lucky. You know, I had met Barry during this process, and you know, and Barry Schwartz, and you know, he is a friend to everybody. Within like a second, he is your best friend, and it was wonderful. So I had gotten to know him, and then you know, I was a little bit afraid. I said, you know, I wonder what Barry would do. He's been on television, he's been all over the world, and you know, here I am, you know, I've got no followers. And I said, you know, Barry, would you mind doing a an interview on my podcast? And he said, sure, Guy, I'd love to. And from there, then it just took off, and that was you know, that was a huge help. That particular interview has the most views. It's I think it's like 30,000 views or something like that already, and
That's great.
so that was, you know, that was really a, you know, a lucky thing for me that he agreed to do that.
And I want to ask more about, because I know now you're helping with shroud.com and you're on the board member of Stera, but I heard a very interesting thing and I want to ask you this first. So I hear that you have a connection to the Savoy family. So I'm sure we all know who the Savoys are. They're the ones who own the Shroud from Marguerite de Charnay, and then they had it in Turin before King Umberto II bequeathed it to the Catholic Church. So tell us about this connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was promoting my book and doing my podcast, one of my viewers was she was the administrative executive person of the American Foundation of Savoy Orders. So the Savoy Orders are kind of you know, related to the Savoy family, but you know, you can be invited to join, and then it's there to promote children's causes. And so I was invited to speak, and Prince Dmitri, who is the grandson of Umberto II. Now, he is not in the royal line, So it was King Umberto II, and then Vittorio Filiberto, I can't remember now exactly. He just passed away, and unfortunately, the line now goes in a different direction, and so now there's a new prince who is now, I guess, I don't think he has the title king, but he has the title prince. But he's the one that's the top of the line, so to speak, in the Savoy family. And then Prince Dimitri's line goes through another daughter, a princess of King Umberto. So he was there. He was, and I presented to him, and one of the things that I did as well, which hopefully he'll continue to remember me, and he introduced me at the for the talk. I There are certain theories that there are coins that were on Jesus' eyes, on underneath the shroud, and then there's certain theories that you can see then the shepherd's hook on those coins, at least on one of them, and that's a Pontius Pilate coin, and you can buy those coins online, and so I was showing then the face, and then I showed a close up of the eyes, and then I showed like kind of a little bump over the lens of the eye where the coin might have been, and then I showed kind of the shepherd's hook, and then I gave him a coin, one of those Pontius Pilate coins. And he was shocked. He was absolutely shocked. And so he says, I just can't believe it. This is a real coin from the Roman times, dated to 36 roughly AD, and it's possibly a similar coin to what was on the on Jesus's eyes in the tomb.
So do they have any like archives that you know of that talk about the shroud? I mean, what do they do now? What do the Savoys do now? They just philanthropists or what?
Yeah, they are, and actually, it's kind of funny. Right before I went up there, I read this paper, and I don't know how I came across it, but there's a paper out there that basically said that after the end of the Second World War, all of the possessions of the Savoy family were then taken over by the government.
Ah,
And it was a constitution that was passed, et cetera, et cetera. So the chapel, the Guarini Chapel, and the palace, and all of the possessions, including the shroud, were actually then taken over by the Italian government. So technically, the shroud did not belong to Umberto II after 1946, when the modern Italian government was formed. And now that didn't mean that the government wanted it. They wanted to be free from religion, so to speak, and they didn't want to be connected to religion. So they continued to allow King Umberto II to possess the shroud, but not necessarily own it. And I don't know if I'm using the terminology right there.
right.
But anyway, he continued to own it and hold on to it. And then in 1983, he passed away, and he bequeathed it to the Pope and the Vatican, and of what he most likely did not own, but nevertheless he bequeathed it over to the Pope. And there was a ceremony, and this Prince Dimitri, he was actually there in person with the Pope, handing over and being part of
Wow.
the paperwork and the ceremony of handing over the shroud to the Pope and the Vatican.
Wow.
So
What?
the question of who actually owned it or owns it today is a little bit up in the air. I would say, based on what I've read, it's probably owned by the Italian government, but they're not going to make a claim on it because they don't
They
want
don't-
to they don't want to
Yeah.
make a mess of it.
Well, that's good. And I'm sure God has his hand in that as well. Okay,
Yes.
so now tell us about what you're doing with shroud.com. And if you wanted to talk about the St. Louis conference, well, I'll just let you speak now about what you want to talk about.
Sure. No, thank you. Absolutely. Yes. So I am. So Barry passed away in June of this year, and prior to that, and actually a long time prior to that, he set up the organization called STERA, the Shroud of Turin Education and Research Association, and STERA then had taken possession. So Barry had already given all of his possessions, Shroud possessions, over to Stera. So Stera, as an organization, now owns all of the Shroud-related possessions. And in that, and these he had in his home, and myself and Russ Briault and Joe Marino, we all went out to his home in Florissant, Colorado, and started collecting all of that stuff and just kind of moving it to a new location in Ohio next to where Joe Marino is. He had a thread. He had a Shroud thread in a tiny little glass vial, and he has a couple. He had a couple of mummy threads from 1300 BC and one from 4000 BC as well. A little piece of cloth, and the other one is another piece of cloth in these little vials. And so, I couldn't believe it. I got to actually see these things. And now they were sealed, of course, and I wasn't going to open them, but it's just hard to believe that, here I am, who am I? And I've got then something here that's actually in my hands, that's actually a part of the what I believe to be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. I'm flabbergasted every time I think about it. And then he also had, I think he probably had about 150 sticky tape slides of different pieces that had been taken during stirp, around the cloth and everything. And I got to look at them. I mean, we couldn't touch them, of course, but to be able to look at that and be able to say, I mean, this is part of the investigation of stirp and stuff like that. And I'm still, like I said, flabbergasted and honored, and just, it's hard to believe that that was the case. So that now all of those things, plus all of his photography that he took during the stirp in 1978, all of the originals of that have now been moved up to Ohio. And they're now in a storage place, in a climate controlled storage. And Joe is actually going through those, and he puts out you've probably seen it if you've gotten on the newsletter, the from the Stera archives. These are things that he's taken out of all of the archives that were there. And there were pallets of stuff that Barry never even unpacked. There's pallets of Diniger. There were pallets of Ray Rogers stuff. And so he just goes in there and starts looking through some of the letters, and they're 50 years old, these letters. And I start looking through there, and he's, reads one that's written to Macron, for example. There was one there from Macron, and some of the, I hate to say it, shenanigans, but the shenanigans that went on, with Macron there and stuff like that. So all of that now is in Ohio, and we are looking for help there. Obviously, financial help. You can go to shroud.com, and there's a link there to donate and help us out there. But there's also, we're definitely looking for some help to kind of organize and archive and catalog all of what's there. And most likely, we're hoping that if we raise enough money, that we could hire maybe a couple of grad students that would want to help to organize and catalog everything that's there. There's a ton of stuff. Now, the other thing too is we're starting to collect other collections. And so the Holy Shroud Guild, I don't know if you are familiar with that, but that was where Father Wunschel, Father Otterbein, and Father Rinaldi, and they had a bunch of stuff that they were doing in the 70s and the 80s. As they were, the stirp campaign or the stirp project was underway, and even afterwards. And so all of those materials, again, myself, Russ, and Joe were going up to collect them from Giorgio Bracaglia, who has possession of it, and he's now going to give it all over to and donate it to Stera. And so Stera is kind of becoming the archive of a lot of the different collections that are out there. And then, there's so much that we just need help to, to go through it and start to help to catalog that.
what's amazing to me is that this is now in the United States of America. I mean, it's like what an opportunity for us at Sage to get involved in archiving all this information from STIR. I mean, there's something really a great opportunity. I kind of like got chills when you're talking. It's like, it's so funny how God works, right? It's just you three guys just taking all this valuable stuff and putting it somewhere, but it needs to be placed in somewhere where people can see it, can look through it. So what an opportunity.
Yeah,
That's
and we would love to, be able to have a museum or something like that that
yeah.
would be able to, have people come and look at it. There's some interesting stories. You
Well,
mentioned the
before you do that,
value.
I'm going to ask Oliver, everybody on board, if you want to ask a question to Guy, well, in about 1 minute, we'll start taking questions. I don't know how this works. Put your hand up or whatever that you want to ask a question and we'll call on you. So go ahead, Guy. Thank you.
Yeah, put it in the chat, and then
Yeah.
if you're watching the chat, then you can read them out. Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned, this stuff that Barry had is irreplaceable. It's,
Yeah.
you can't say that there's a value on it other than if it gets destroyed, it's a one of a kind thing and it's gone forever. And and certainly the threads and the slides and what have you. So now those were personally carried by Joe back to Ohio, but the all of the other papers and stuff like that is also one of a kind of a thing, and we were not able to insure it as it was being trucked across the country. And so we didn't know exactly what to do, and then we finally said, well, why don't we put some of those Apple AirTags in each of the pallets, and at least we'll know whether the pallet made it or not. And so it
Great.
was kind of fun. We were watching the pallets go across the country as the driver was driving from Colorado and then through St. Louis, I guess, and then up to Ohio. So that was kind of cool.
Wow. Amazing. Well, my final question, I know I see you have some upcoming book projects. So why don't you tell us about those?
Yeah, and let me interrupt. I think Nora, you've talked about the Shroud conference. So go to
Oh, yeah.
shroud2025conference.com, and we are close to finishing that. Really getting everything pretty well done. We have the speakers set up. We have the featured speakers chosen. We've been, gearing up now to actually start selling tickets for the speakers. That'll happen now, and then the public tickets will go on sale in January. So please stay tuned for that, and that's pretty cool. So I now in the middle of all this, I don't know where the time goes. I wish I had just had more time in the day,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, there's only 24 hours. And but I have been, and I don't know what you can see. Hopefully, you can see. My PowerPoint. Can you all see
Yes.
that?
You can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I have been doing writing this one now as a historical book, and it's actually now going to probably end up becoming two books, and it's on the Mandylion. So the Mandylion, and in my book, I I basically assumed, and I followed Ian Wilson, that the Shroud went to Edessa and then Edessa up to Constantinople in 944. And now that I've been doing research on it for probably the last 12 months, um, in my mind, there's a high probability that the Mandylion and the Shroud are not one and the same. And what I'm showing here is I really started the book with kind of an art history because I thought the art is actually it's not written history, but it's a pictorial history.
Right.
And what I found is that, as you go back in time, the oldest image that is probably similar to the what is believed to be the Mandylion is this Anka icon which was created in AD 600. And if you'll notice, there's kind of and unfortunately, this particular image, I wasn't able to get a better image, has some interesting kind of, features to it. And then there's another one in the Sancta Sanctorum in 754. And then you have a couple that are from 1350. And then I hate to say it, you end up as well with some challenges on the Veil of Veronica. And my conclusion is that there's probably a very high probability that the Veil of Veronica is a conjured image, and the Mandylion is a conjured image, probably created around the 600s, and that the Shroud is probably not that. Now I know, I saw some of the images that are in your series there that you're saying it goes through Edessa and everything that the Shroud did. But if you look at these images are very different from the Pantocrator images. I think that I can't remember who was showing it, Stephen. And so there's this set of images. These are probably the ones that Constantine mentions in 944 when he says the image that he received was nailed to a board and was decorated with gold and silver around it. And that's what all of these are. And these are really kind of called the Holy Face or Mandylion. And then there's a handful of other images that are kind of interesting as well. And these then kind of go off to the east, not the west. So the west more has the Christ Pantocrator. The east then has what they're calling the Mandylion. I call them Mandylion Shroud. And these Mandylion Shroud images you'll see are very, very similar to the Christ Pantocrator. And so anyway, this is what I'm working on. I've kind of written the book, and now I'm going back and I am really doing a very deep dive on the research, and it keeps proving to me with a high probability in my mind that the image of Edessa, the Mandylion, then are definitely not the same, and that the Mandylion or the image of Edessa was conjured in about maybe 600 AD, and and then the story, kind of followed it along. And anyway, I know that that's going to be controversial with a lot of people, and that's kind of what's fun. I'm going to present this at the Sikh conference coming up in July, and we'll have hopefully some interesting discussions on that. So that's what I'm working on right now.
But I think we've all determined that the Shroud is not scared of controversy. So that's wonderful. So
Yes.
Oliver, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have one question. Where is the Shroud Conference being staged and when?
Yes, so it is going to be in St. Louis, Missouri. It's going to be at the Drury Inn in one of the Drury Inns that is out there. We've got there's a perfect space for what we're trying to do. It's going to be July 31st to August 3rd. So it's going to be, and actually we'll probably have a reception on July 30th. Then it'll be a full packed day of academic stuff on the 30th, the 1st and the 2nd, and then the morning of the 3rd, which is a Sunday. And then in parallel with that, we're going to have public sessions. So there's going to be academic sessions for about 150 people. And then there's going to be public sessions, which are going to be for, 100 to maybe a couple of hundred. That's where we're going to also have the exhibit from Pam. She's going to be bringing the exhibit, which we're very, very excited about. And, and be able to see that, in person. And, there's going to be, all kinds of folks. A couple of the featured speakers, I think the one that really I'm most interested in is meeting with Tristan Casabianca. He's the one that did the FOIA request on the raw data from the British Museum concerning the actual dating of the dating elements that were then measured by the 3 labs for the radiocarbon dating. And so that one's definitely going to be pretty fascinating. John Jackson is planning to be there. Giulio Fanti, Russ Brial to be speaking, and a handful of others, Jack Marquardt, and there's probably 30 speakers altogether. And
Are there openings for any more speakers if there's anybody from the SAGE membership that wants to apply?
Well, yes, we could possibly, we have a wait list right now for the academic side, and then we have a wait list as well for the public side. And so yes, definitely send your name in if you want to go out to shroud2025conference.com. And then there's a speaker tab, and then submit your stuff there, or you can just email me at author@guydpowell.com, and I'll get that as well.
Yeah, and the follow-up email from this meeting, I'll list all those emails and everything. So is there any more questions, Oliver?
No, that was the only one.
Okay, so Guy, thank you. This was fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to, I love the art history, so I'm really looking forward to that book. So thank you for coming, and yeah, for everything you do for
Yeah.
the Shroud. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Nan. I really appreciate it, and thanks to everyone. Yeah, look forward to meeting you all in St. Louis.